Hi crafters, welcome to Try It Tuesday. So this week's video, this week's project is a technique that I tried ahead of time. I just did one about an hour ago. I did these to see what they would look like. I had an idea of what I wanted to try, and usually Try It Tuesdays, I just go right for the video and try it to see what happens. But I had one fail already yesterday of something I thought, oh, this would be a neat idea, and total fail. So this one, because I haven't tried it before, I just wanted to try it ahead of time, and I'm happy with how that came out. I even did it on this design for a slimline card. And then if you want a smaller card. So today I'm going to do just a smaller project, and actually I think this is something I'd like to try in my art journal too. But anyways, we're going to try, we're going to do it. It's going to work. It's using these stencils, and it's painting, but it's easier even than paint by number. So I'm just off camera here. I'm going to take some pixie spray and put that on the back of my stencil. I just spray it like over a garbage can, that works. And I'm going to go like roughly center. I'm not too worried about it because it's not a symmetrical design anyways. And you do want to be careful on a stencil like this where it's got very small, very intricate lines on there. I don't want to do too much of this because I don't want to break any of these little tiny, these nice fine pieces. So what I'm going to do, we're basically just hand painting this card, but we don't have to draw or be a good painter. This is easier than paint by numbers because we're just filling in the blanks. So because I'm using a dark cardstock and I'm going to put some bright colored paints on it, and actually the paints I'm using, the colors I chose, some of them are translucent. So you would see the black right through it. And I don't want that. I want the colors to be nice and vibrant. So I'm just taking some white paint. I happen to be using white chalk paint. But any white paint that you have is going to work. And I'm just using a piece of cut off sponge to apply that. And you notice, like, instead of just getting a thick wad of paint, I spread it out on my surface first. So I just have a very thin layer of paint there. And I'm just going to daub that down everywhere on my stencil here. And it's not going to be a perfect covering, and I'm not worried about that. It's just like a first layer to cover up the darkness of the background and allow the paints on top to be brighter. So they've got this white base instead of a dark black base on them. And that's about good. So you can see it's not perfect. There's still some black. There's plenty of black showing through there. But for the most part, it's white. I've really lightened up that black background. And if you're using anything other than chalk paints, you do want to make sure that that white layer dries before you go on to your next layer. But because I'm using chalk paints, this is going to be dry when I go to use it. So actually I'm going to do the leaves first. So I'm going to use these two colors of chalk paint. One is tin peas and the other one is slimed. Just so I've got a little bit of variation of color going on. You could use just one color and that would work fine. This one is actually opaque, and then this one, it tells you right on the bottle, it's semi-opaque. So I'm going to take a little bit of this. Which one's this? Slimed. So it's a brighter green. And I don't have a lot of leaves on there, so I've probably put out already way more paint than what I really need. And I need a paintbrush. So I'm going to take my paintbrush, and hopefully my paint's on film. Looks like it. And I'm loading up a little bit of paint on there, but I'm going to wipe off some of it because I just want to be putting down a very thin layer of paint at a time. Now, the reason I do my green leaves first is so that I can pick out which ones are green. If you happen to do one, paint it green, and later decided you want it red, well, you've got a couple choices. You can either cover it up with red, or you can just leave it green. If it's green, it's going to look like it's supposed to be green, and if you paint it red, it's going to look like it's part of the blossom. Our eye is pretty good about getting tricked by colors that way. And I don't know if this one's supposed to be green or red, if it's part of the leaf or part of the flower, but I just decided I want some green over on this side too, so we'll put it there. Now this color here was our semi-opaque, so you can still see quite a bit of black cardstock right through that green. So because of that, I'm going to put another coat on it, and because it's chalk paint, this first coat's going to already be dry, so I can just go on there and put in another layer. And you can see how that darkens it up. So this side's more green than that one because it's got a second layer already. If you're using an acrylic paint, then you may want to heat it in between your layers. There's several things that I like about the chalk paints, and one of them is that they dry so quickly just on their own. I do a lot of art journaling, so I use a lot of chalk paints in my art journals. They're so easy to work with when they dry that fast. Okay, so there's our light color. And I'm going to put a little bit of this darker green on too, which is our tinned peas. Now this one's opaque, so when I put it on top, it should cover up that light green, just totally cover it. And you'll notice my paintbrush, I'm not cleaning it in between because I'm actually want a little bit of both colors of green on those leaves, so I'm okay if they're mixed a little bit even on my brush. So I'll put that down, and then I want them to be a little bit blended. So I'm going to go in with my dirty paintbrush again because I'm just going between the two greens, and I'm okay if they get mixed up a little bit. And then I'm going to go from the tops down and just add some light green on there. So it's a little bit more blended and it's not quite so definite where one color stopped and the other one started. And then you can let that dry, and then you look at it and decide, do I want more dark green? Do I want more of the light green? Or do I like it just the way that it is? I think I'm going to go in there with another layer of the light green, just touching the tips of some of those petals. And that's probably good. So I'm going to change colors now and go over to the red of the flower. So because of that, I do want to clean my brush, and I'm kind of, oh my gosh, it's like I almost have to stand on my head because I did not put my water cup in a good place. Okay, so now we're on, I hope I didn't put my sleeve in the red in the paint. So now we're going on to the red, and again, I want to do two different shades. So I've pulled out these two here, red lipsticks, which it's telling us is translucent, and this one is prawn, and that's semi-opaque. So this one, we should be able to see right through it. This one, you're gonna see a little bit through it. So because of that, I'm gonna put this semi-opaque one on the bottom. So I'll just put it down first, that's all it means, is I'm gonna put a coat of that first, and I am going to put it everywhere. So load up some of that on my brush, and then I'm kind of taking off a lot of it so my brush isn't totally saturated. Like, I certainly don't want it dripping with paint. And then just gonna cover all of this, and I'm not worried about, like on this first coat, you're going to see some brush strokes, and that's okay because the second coat will cover it up. You might see a little bit of white showing through still, and that's okay. This is just my base coat of color on the blossom. just something I haven't done a lot of. You could do this with any of your stencil designs too, eh? So even though I'm doing this for a Christmas theme because of the time of year that I'm filming this, December, you could definitely use this for any season. So now I'm just going around and doing a second coat of this. So my light color is going to be a little bit darker on here. And my idea is to do like what I did here. So where the petals are connected to the center of the flower, have them a little bit darker, and out at the tips, have them a little bit lighter. It's quite random, and I'm not doing anything proper with lighting, anything like that. It's just that I want more than one shade in there. So I've decided to have the tips of my leaves lighter. So because of that, I know I'm going to put the dark red more in the center here. I'm not too worried about making sure that this lighter first color is going all the way to the bottom of the leaves. I'm just putting the second coat on the top. The reason I did the first coat everywhere is because it helps to cover up that black. Just having either one of your paint colors helps to cover up the black, and it just gives me a base coat for under the next one. So here we go for our darker red, which is called Red Lipstick. I really like that color. The red color called London Bus is also a nice red for Christmas. And so I've got my dirty brush again, but I'm just going from the light to this more vibrant red. So I'm okay if they're mixing. That's totally okay with me. So I'm not even going to bother cleaning my brush in between. And now I'm not doing the entire petal because I don't want to cover up all of that lighter pink, or the lighter red pink. What color was that? Prawn. That's the proper name. So I don't want to cover up all the prawn. I want to leave especially the tips of the leaves. So I'm avoiding going right to the tip with this red color. And you could do it a different way. You could decide you want just the center of the leaves, the center of the petals to be the darker red, or maybe just the right hand side of the petals. So you can do it however you like. And you can see, I'll show this to the camera once I get this last petal done here. I'll move it a little bit closer, that you can see where my darker red stops and the lighter prawn starts. So it's not blended very well. It's kind of a definite line there. So while I'm not concerned about it being perfect or anything like that, I do want to have it a little bit more blended. So I'm going to go back in, even with my dirty brush, pick up some of that lighter prawn, and then from the top, just take some strokes down. So you can probably see on this one here is where I did some strokes. That one I haven't yet. So you can see the difference where it's a little bit more blended, and I prefer that look. So I'm just going to go down and do some strokes from the tip down and just give it a little bit of a quick blend. And then now that I've got, basically it's all done. I'm just going to take a look at it and see, do I want anything else? And you know what? I do. I want my red to be a little bit darker red. So I'm just going to go in and do a little bit more right in the centers. So that's a second coat now, and that will make it a little bit darker. And again, if you're using something other than chalk paint, you may want to dry that in between. Chalk paints just dry nice and fast. There, and I think that's enough. And I'm not going to worry about painting the center of the flower. You totally could. You could go in there with a yellow or a gold and paint that. But I have a different idea for the center. So now is the reveal. I'm going to take this off carefully. And the reason I'm doing it so careful is because some of these pieces of the stencil, these little lines in here, are pretty delicate, and I've got so much paint on there from all these different colors and layers that I don't want any of them to get stuck in the paint and end up breaking them off. So I'm just pulling them gently. There we go. And that one's ready to go in some water. So you can see here, this is looking pretty messy, right? So this is what I would call the ugly stage. And we're gonna neaten that up. Now before I do any neatening up of it, I'm gonna get rid of all this extra paint I've got because I know myself, I will end up sticking something right into that wet paint. There, that's a little bit better. So before I do any, I'm going to do some pen work on there, but before I do that, I do want to make sure that this is 100% dry. So I am going to go in with a heat gun and just make sure that's totally dry. And actually I see on here, now that I'm looking a little bit closer, that I've got a little bit of red paint where it should be green. So I'm trying to figure out, my water cup's in a bad place. I'm kind of just doing it blind, stabbing my paintbrush where I think the water cup is at. And I really hope I don't knock it over. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of green and just touch that up just a little bit. I might even be able to just take the paint off my lid here and just touch up that green. And a little bit over here. And a little bit there. So it's quite forgiving, right? You can just do your own little touch-ups as you need. And that one looks like it might need a little second coat on there. And I'll just blend that one out a little bit. Perfect. Good enough anyways. Good enough that I like it. Okay, so because I did that, I'm going to heat set it again just to make sure all of that's dry. And then I'm going to go in with a gold gel pen. And I'm going to outline. So that's going to help to define where the petals are. I'm going to cover up any place there's white, because for this particular color scheme, I don't want any of the white to show. So I'm outlining the petals. And I like this little outline of black there. I like that. So I actually want to leave the black. So when I'm outlining, you might be able to see on there, I'm actually putting my gold line right on top of the paint. So it's at the edge of the petal, except where I have, like here, I've got some white paint showing. So then I'm just going to go right over top of the white. And there, my white's gone. And then I can put these leaf veins back in here, get that detail that kind of disappeared on me. And I'll do the same thing up here. So I'm basically just doodling. You can do this as like a sloppy, loose doodle, or you could do very neat lines. That's where your own style can come out. And the edge of that one was a little bit, the paint was not a nice straight line, but by putting this gold line over it, you hide all of that. And again, wherever I've got white, I want to cover that up. And you can see where I've got some of these little white dots out here, and that is from the stencil. There's these little openings here, which depending what you're doing, it'd be really cool. It kind of looks like splatter, right? But we're going to cover up all that white because in this particular design, I'm wanting more gold and then the richer colors. I don't want white for this one. So this is a gold gel pen, which I'm finding works on top of the paint really well. And again, if you're working with chalk paint, as I did here, almost any of these pens that you use to do outlines or doodling, I just find that I have good luck with any of them on top of chalk paint. Now, before I discovered chalk paint, and I used to work with acrylic paint and then try to doodle, I found it very frustrating in that a lot of these gel pens in that you'd write for maybe 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, you'd doodle, and then the ink would stop flowing. And I tried all sorts of different pens, paint pens, gel pens. Felt pens seem to work the best on top of the acrylic paint, but I just really struggled with it. But once I moved to chalk paint, then I found all those different pens I had that weren't working for me suddenly worked so well on the chalk paint. So that's another reason why I really like working with chalk paint. So a little tip that I have heard, if you're working with acrylic paints and wanting to do some doodling or outlining like this, let your paint cure first so it's totally cured. And that is more so than just drying it. So dry to the touch isn't enough. It needs to cure, and then your pens have at least a better chance of having the ink flow on them. So to cure, it's for acrylic paint, most of them to cure, you're looking at sitting the paints or sitting your project for 48 to 72 hours, and then the paint is actually cured and you get a little bit easier to get pens to work on them. The other tip that I can give you when you're working with gel pens like this, or I have, gold isn't going to show up. I have a white. No, that's not white. A white one here. So same kind of pen. This one happens to be a jelly roll pen, but it's a gel pen. So when you're writing with it, can you see that on camera? So you know when you use an ink pen, and if the ink isn't flowing, what we tend to do is press harder and scratch faster, and that gets our ink flowing, right? We do this, and then the ink starts going, and then we can write again. With these gel pens, it's the opposite. If you press hard, scribble fast, it just stops. And if that happens to you, the way to get it going again is to just hold the tip of that against your skin. And the warmth from your skin helps to get the ink flowing again. So sometimes if I'm working on a project where I'm doing a lot of doodling, by the time I'm done, I have these little white dots all over here because I've just kept my pen flowing. But the trick is, don't do the press hard, go fast thing. It's more of a just touch it lightly and roll it slow, and you get a really nice result with it. So avoid that temptation to treat it like an ink pen, and that'll help too. But these chalk paints, like, can you tell? They're my favorite. I love chalk paints. But you know, everybody has their own favorite for their own reason. Kind of depends what kind of art you like to do, what kind of surface you're working on, what type of work you might be layering, what kind of medium you're layering on top of it. All the paints have their own purpose. So I'm just continuing to outline. So I'm kind of serving two purposes here. I'm outlining my leaves, which is kind of neatening up those edges, and I just like the look of adding gold to it. But I'm also covering up any of that initial white paint that I put down. So I'm covering up any white lines. If there's a white line, that means I'm going to put gold in that spot. And I'm not being super neat, but I'm not a really particular crafter, I guess. So I'm okay with it. To me, it's more about the process, and I certainly don't want to do art that causes me stress. This is my way to de-stress, is to create. And even if it doesn't turn out the way I expected to, I just chalk it up as, you know, something I tried and it just didn't work. So I learned something from it, instead of feeling like, oh, it was a failure. Instead, it was a trial. So we don't always have to expect things to turn out, especially the first time that you've done something. If this is your first time for working with stencils or for working with paints, don't expect it to turn out the same as what it's going to be when you've done it many times. Like anything in life, right? First time's a trial. But this is pretty easy, seeing as we're using a stencil. There's no drawing involved, and kind of paint by number. Okay, so we're, if you're still sticking with me, oh my gosh, I hope when I edit I can figure out how to speed this up, because that's a long process. So the other thing, I think I have it all outlined. So in the center here, you could do it with gold paint. You could put little beads in there. Many things you can do. I'm just drawing a gold circle. Just go around in the circle, cover up that white. And the size of my circle is determined by how much white there is, and my goal is just to cover up that white with the gold. And I have noticed that this particular gold pen, when you're doing a larger area like these little circles, tends to look like it's kind of yellow, so it works out good for the center poinsettia. And again, I'll cover up that white. And these little white specks out here now, which were from the holes in the stencil, part of that design, I'm just taking my gold pen and I'm putting little circles right over top of them. If I happen to have a little smudge of paint someplace, I'm just going to put a gold circle over it. And sometimes I'll add some extras if I just feel like there's not enough, because I don't want just one all by itself. I like odd numbers too, so if there's only two, then I might just add in another one. And then the other thing I'm going to do is actually take some gold paint and splatter it over it, because if there's any imperfections, that kind of helps to, I don't know, hide it, take your eye away from it maybe. So this is chalk paint too, just happens to be, but it's the gold. I'm just adding some water. I'm picking up a little bit of water out of my bucket with my splat brush and mixing that paint a little bit. And actually, I think I have it too thin, because I don't want to be splatting water. I actually want to splat gold. Okay, anyways, we'll try it. There's some on there. And I'm just going to pull this up and let the paint fly. I kind of like this step, right? Because it's so messy and it's random, and who knows what's going to happen. You do as much or as little as you like. There you go. And we're done. So there's our project for today. This one I did take the gold gel pen and just did a little dotted line around the outside. This one happens to have from the die cut I used here, which is, oh, I should share that with you. It has a little embossed ridge, and so I just took the gold pen and followed that ridge. I don't know what it's called. Essential Slim Cuts, that's what it's called. So if you're looking for this on Scrap and Bean's website, it's the Essential Slim Cuts. So it gives you 4 different designs that'll cut out the shape for your slimline cards. The slimline cards are the ones that are like this size, right? Which actually, that might kind of look nice on there. Might have to work with that. if you're not doing a slimline card, you can use these same die cuts and, you know, just use a portion of it, right? So you can use that die cut for either size. Anyways, there's our project for today, and I hope you gals enjoyed that. Maybe tempted to try out something a little bit different. So great way to use your stencils. Happy crafting.